sleek, stylish, and comfortable. These are the words that best describe today's sponsor, Kufandy. Kufandy is a professional menswear brand that is shifting into the high gear in 2025. Kufandy has decided to partner with Christopher Bell and Joe Gibbs Racing, which doesn't just include a primary race at Martinsville. Their partnership includes exclusive clothing as well as Christopher Bell's picks. As for myself, I've been able to wear some of Kufandy's products. They've provided me with this sleek, stylish muscle t-shirt as well as the matching workout shorts. And I'm telling you, Kufandy's clothing makes me look extremely stylish and comfortable while I'm chasing PRs in the gym. I've also gotten some of their soft touch t-shirts, and unlike some of the other shirts, they're not overly baggy and they also fit really well. If you want to check out what Kufandy has to offer, I encourage you to check out kufandy.com and use my code NP25 for a special discount. Thanks again to Kufandy for sponsoring Digital Gas House. Historians would say that professional sports are the modern gladiator games. It is a physical testament of strength where all of the spoils go to the victor. Considering the prestigious titles, monetary prizes, and social status on the line, it's easy to understand why players as well as drivers wear their heart on their sleeves. In many cases, those wide range of emotions cannot be contained in a civil way. Some of the prominent examples are in basketball, the malice at the palace. The rivalry between the Pacers and the Pistons got so heated in 2004 that many players and fans would get physical, which even resulted in police intervention and assault charges. There was the Cardinals-Reds brawl in 2010 where Reds pitcher Johnny Cueto kicked Cardinals catcher Jason LaRue in the head. Following this fight, LaRue would never play another inning of baseball. There's also the rivalries that take place in NASCAR. Despite motorsports being on the edge of danger and there being many fatalities in NASCAR's history, there is no shortage of drivers that put their competitors in harm's way. That was the case in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where two of NASCAR's rising stars would butt heads. This is a story of how two drivers let their emotions get the best of them, putting themselves as well as others' lives in jeopardy, all in the pursuit of victory.
Car. And the 99 has turned over Brad Keselowski.
And we have a caution. This is going to be down to the wire. Oh, they touch. He spun out. Carl gets into Keselowski. Carl Edwards will win.
NRF Productions presents NASCAR's most dangerous rivalry. So this rivalry was ignited because you had two young, hungry drivers that were looking to establish themselves in NASCAR. On one hand, you had Carl Edwards. The rise of Ken Schrader's nephew to prominence was one of the greatest stories, as Edwards had won the Busch Series championship in 2007 and instantly made a first impression when he burst onto the NASCAR Cup Series scene in 2005. Plus, he was beloved by fans for his charisma off the track. However, at the time, Carl Edwards had a two-faced personality. All of that goodness and charisma was often discarded when he was on the track, as Edwards was still a bit immature as he lacked respect for his fellow competitors. The other side of the rivalry was Brad Keselowski. From a racing family himself, Brad fought tooth and nail on lower tier equipment to get a golden opportunity at Junior Motorsports in the Nationwide Series. Quickly, Brad Keselowski made a name for himself as a driver that could hold his own against the Cup guys on Saturday. So considering the fact that these were two drivers that were young, hungry, and ready to take the NASCAR world by storm, it's not really a surprise that these two would start clashing on the racetrack. The 2009 Aaron's 499 at the Talladega Superspeedway brought out a wide range of emotions. Not really surprising considering that a NASCAR Superspeedway race always brings out a wide range of diverse emotions, whether it's from the degenerate fans, financially stressed car owners, or the physically competitive drivers. For Carl Edwards, he had racing redemption at his hands. Especially considering that his aggressive push of Greg Biffle in the 2008 Talladega Chase race was the turning point of the championship. This was the moment where Carl Edwards and Roush Fenway Racing lost the title. Now in 2009, this was his opportunity to redeem himself and get his first win towards a potential 2009 title. For Brad Keselowski, he and James Finch were the Davids going up against the Goliaths of Carl Edwards and Jack Roush. If they were to win this 200-mile-per-hour game of Capture the Checkered Flag, it would be the first Cup win for both the driver and the car owner. As fate would have it, Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski would be the two to settle the 2009 Aaron's 499. The two would tandem draft to the lead until they hit the long Talladega front stretch, where this finish would prove to be as wild and reckless as anything in the Talladega infield the night before. Brad Keselowski won this race in the most violent way possible. The Talladega fence mutilated his Ford Fusion, and Carl Edwards could no longer see Claritin Clear out of his windshield. He could at least still see the finish line where he paid homage to Ricky Bobby. So while Brad Keselowski said that he wanted to apologize for Carl and owned up to the wreck, let's be honest, he didn't give a fuck about Carl Edwards. He was here to win this race, and he was not about to break a NASCAR rule in order to not collide with Carl Edwards. Implemented at the turn of the century was the double yellow line rule at the superspeedway tracks like Daytona and Talladega. This rule deterred cars from going below the yellow line due to the high speeds and potential safety concerns. But in this case, it completely backfired. A car went airborne and was completely shredded by the catch fence because Brad Keselowski was too scared to potentially go below the double yellow line and get a penalty. So Brad Keselowski and Carl Edwards left the track on their private helicopters, but unfortunately they weren't the only ones to be airlifted out of Talladega. The debris from the Edwards machine showered onto the Talladega fans. Because of that, 2 women were airlifted to a local Birmingham hospital, one for a broken jaw and another because of a specified medical condition. The avalanche of car debris that made its way into the grandstands due to this crash injured 7 people. On the casualties, Carl Edwards was quoted in saying that we'll continue to race like this until we kill somebody. However, considering everything on the line at the end of the race, I doubt Carl Edwards would have done anything differently. This was simply a display of what you get when you mix drivers with an intense amount of emotions at the end of the race with the dangerous high speeds of superspeedway racing. Despite Brad Keselowski and Carl Edwards playing with fire, NASCAR chose not to penalize or potentially deter the drivers from doing this again. If anything, this was what NASCAR wanted, and they would make it known early in 2010 that it was up to the drivers to dictate the code of conduct on the racetrack. For the 2010 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series season, the tone would be set during the preseason media tour. NASCAR Vice President at the time, Robin Pemberton, took the mic and doubled down on the aggressive driving in the series. The sanctioning body would let the drivers police themselves, and Pemberton even had a catchy term for it.
Boys, have at it, let's have at it, and have a good time.
It would take until the fourth race of the 2010 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series season for that philosophy to be tested. Carl Edwards was again a preseason favorite to lift the Sprint Cup high over his head in mid-November. Edwards was aiming to turn back the clock to his 2005 success, apparent by the throwback paint scheme to his first career win. Meanwhile, Brad Keselowski's nationwide success allowed for him to cross the rite of passage into the Cup Series with Penske Racing. The 12 team struggled all weekend before they implemented things learned from teammate Kurt Busch into the car's setup. As it would turn out, the 2004 Cup Champions racing knowledge would pay off. Brad Keselowski showed pace for the first time at a non-superspeedway in his Cup Series career. Both drivers were going to be contenders for the victory until the two again would clash paths early in the race.
Ooh, Carl got clipped by Brad Keselowski. Just run him up the hill, couldn't save it, and got into Joey Logano in the 20 car.
Brad Keselowski, despite his best attempt to lift, would collide with Carl Edwards, who desperately wanted to be on the bottom. Carl Edwards would have to go to the garage for repairs, and he departed his vehicle vivid. However, once he saw the replay, Carl Edwards claimed that he had calmed down.
I really thought it was his fault, but that replay doesn't look like it was as malicious as I thought.
While Carl Edwards said he was content, words can be deceiving. Deep down, Edwards was still frustrated, as this was the third time that Brad Keselowski had collided with Edwards and completely ruined his day. Showcasing the boys have at it mentality, Carl Edwards would go back out onto that racetrack and signal to Brad Keselowski that a line had been crossed. Brad Keselowski, laps away from a top 5 finish, was being tantalized by a driver 156 laps off of his pace. After Edwards tried to wreck Keselowski a lap earlier, the Scott's number 99 Ford would create another lasting memory on the Atlanta Motor Speedway front stretch.
And the 99 has turned over Brad Keselowski.
And we have a caution.
Brad Keselowski's promising run was over. That was the least of his worries, as his life was put on the line by Carl Edwards. The impact from the car turning up and over clearly rattled Brad Keselowski.
I don't know if I'm okay.
The reason why Keselowski's car even went airborne in the first place was due to a design flaw with the brand new Generation 5 car. This crash just reinforced NASCAR's decision to ditch the rear wing starting at Martinsville. Carl Edwards, upon seeing Brad Keselowski go airborne, was horrified. However, it begs the question, why did Carl Edwards even do this in the first place? Carl Edwards, via Facebook, defended his decision to wreck Brad Keselowski. However, guys like Darrell Waltrip saw this as a completely over-the-line move by Carl Edwards.
That was not necessary. Very unnecessary.
So how NASCAR chose to react to the situation was in line with their boys have at it slogan. Carl Edwards was given 3 months probation. That's right, no suspension, no monetary fine, and no season points penalty for nearly committing vehicular manslaughter. Car owner Jack Roush loved this decision, not just because he wouldn't be liable for any fines, but now the feud could easily be put in the rearview mirror. Before the races at Bristol, both Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski were called to the NASCAR hauler. Whether it was the picture of them smiling and patting each other on the back, it suggested that this feud was finally put to rest. Although, considering the rivalry and boys have at it being at its peak, it wouldn't take long for this rivalry to get hot once again. You just had to be there in the spring of 2010 for the peak of Boys Have At It. This was a time where not only two four-time champions clashed, but Kyle Busch didn't want to meet Denny Hamlin after the All-Star race because he knew he couldn't control himself after that finish. Despite the boys have at it theme, the Carl Edwards-Brad Keselowski feud had become a cold one. The two were preoccupied on their NASCAR Cup Series seasons as well as chasing after the 2010 NASCAR Nationwide Series title. For both Brad and Carl, the Missouri-Illinois Dodge Dealers 250 was a small stepping stone towards that ambition. This was a race where Brad Keselowski dominated and was well on his way to his fourth win of the season. A crash with 4 laps to go was the worst case scenario for the Nationwide team owners, as they knew with overtime it was time to tear up some equipment. Especially considering that it would be Brad Keselowski versus Carl Edwards for the win. The two would jockey to the final lap where Brad Keselowski into turn 1 nudged and nearly wrecked Carl Edwards to take the lead. As the two were side by side as they passed by the pilot Flying J on the backstretch, fans were just hoping that this wasn't going to end up like the two other notable cases of this rivalry. However, Carl Edwards had other plans.
This is going to be down to the wire. Oh, they touch. He spun out. Carl gets into Keselowski. Carl Edwards will win.
Carl Edwards would right rear hook Brad Keselowski into the wall. This to many was considered a reckless act of endangerment that, a decade later, has resulted in the suspensions of several NASCAR superstars. While it was easy to understand why Carl Edwards was frustrated with Brad Keselowski in that moment, given their history, right rear hooking Brad into the wall seemed a bit overboard. So in the aftermath of this crash, Brad Keselowski had to deal with two pains. Number 1, losing the race. Number 2, having his dad try to resolve the fight for him. Bob Keselowski, Brad Keselowski's dad, would utter a clear message to Carl Edwards.
I'm sick and tired of this. I'll get my own damn uniform back out and take care of this. He ain't gonna kill my boy.
In victory lane, Carl Edwards reassured Bob that he didn't try to kill his son. However, he made it clear that he is frustrated with Brad Keselowski's racing on the track, and this was his way of self-policing the situation. Keselowski was frustrated that he and Edwards had quote-unquote ironed things out, yet here he was with a wrecked race car at Gateway because of Edwards right rear hooking him into the wall. However, the worst part of this was all of the innocent bystanders that were torn up due to this feud. At the time, NASCAR race teams were struggling hard due to the Great Recession, so as a result, Carl Edwards got a lot more backlash than he did in the previous two incidents for ruining drivers and teams that had nothing to do with this rivalry. Boys Have At It had officially made NASCAR the Wild Wild West, and it was time for the people in charge to lay down the iron fist. Stemming from the finish of the race, Carl Edwards would be fined $25,000 and docked 60 NASCAR Nationwide driver and owner points. As for Brad Keselowski, he would be placed on NASCAR probation until the end of the year. Robin Pemberton's justification for the penalties was that NASCAR felt that Brad and Carl had stepped over the line of what NASCAR considered good, aggressive, healthy, hard racing. Brad Keselowski reinforced that this was unnecessary and that he and his race team supported NASCAR's decision. When it came to the penalties, Carl Edwards was fine with it, as he liked that NASCAR was now holding Brad Keselowski accountable for his actions. As it would turn out, the penalties were enough, as the rivalry would cool off to be a cold one. Over the next 6 years, this rivalry would be two fierce competitors that were racing against each other for Nationwide and Cup Series championships. Now, the most interesting part about this was that both drivers after this feud would pivot into different directions. Carl Edwards, who was seen as the one that overreacted, especially in the cases of Atlanta and Gateway, would really mellow out over the years and gain a lot more respect for his competitors. As for Brad Keselowski, he would become the aggressor in the next few years. Keselowski, on his way to NASCAR stardom, would end up clashing with NASCAR veterans like Tony Stewart, Matt Kenseth, and Jeff Gordon. So, as for the Carl Edwards versus Brad Keselowski feud, this is easily NASCAR's most dangerous rivalry. This was an extreme case of boys have at it where cars went airborne, fans were flown to the hospital, and innocent race teams were met with millions of dollars in damage. However, overall, what these two showcased in their rivalry was the intensity of sports and how easy it is to lose your mental sanity in the pursuit of glory.